Thanks so much for joining us today on Feelin' Good, sponsored by Warren County Community Services. I'm your host, Shelly Abrams, and we actually have not been back in the Channel 6 studio for several months, and I'm delighted to say that we are back in the studio today just to show you how new and improved the new interior is, and to welcome our very special guest, our very own Congressman, Greg Landsman, who carves out time. This is the third year that we've interviewed. And I'm always like so delighted and appreciative.
It's my job.
That you take out
part of my job.
Well, that you take the time to talk with your constituents.
It baffles me that not every member of Congress does this. I mean, we do town halls, we do community conversations, we do meet and greets, we do podcasts, we do whatever, any opportunity to engage, in a conversation with the people we serve gives us a better understanding of how to make things happen and what work to do.
Well, we appreciate that so much. I mean, your office is one of the offices of only one that I have heard of that actually answers all calls from people that...
Yeah, we try to either answer every call or call someone back if it slips into voicemail. But it's very important to us that we call them back, that we hear them out, and that they get a response.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, usually what we try to do is we look back, look forward, and look at current status of issues.
Sure.
To see what your perspectives are. So there's so much going on. I mean, that's an understatement. So let's look back a little bit.
Sure.
On the last few months, and just wherever you would like to begin. What's been going on with you and in Washington?
So, I just started on Energy and Commerce, which is a very significant committee in the United States Congress. It handles almost all of the policy work that affects our lives. My issue has always been, or passion has always been, children and families, particularly those children and families most marginalized, and how do you build a better community for children and families. And if you do that, everyone does really well. I mean, most communities, if children are doing really well, everyone's doing great.
Right. And
on Energy and Commerce, it's everything from consumer safety to healthcare to big tech to the environment. And it's all of the policy work, substantive policy work that the Congress does that isn't outside of the United States. So Armed Services and the Foreign Affairs Committee, they deal with the national security stuff and intelligence. And then you have Ways and Means, which does taxes, budget or appropriations, which does the spending, but all the policy stuff goes through Energy and Commerce. And it's a big opportunity for us in this region to have a voice there. I believe our district is whether you're a Republican or Democrat, an independent, somebody unaffiliated, we are pretty pragmatic. And so having a very pragmatic, I believe I pride myself on being as pragmatic as possible, just approaching policy in the most thoughtful way, that leads to solving a problem, as opposed to the political nonsense that a lot of politicians sort of engage in. And so, hopefully that will lead to much better outcomes here.
Well, I think problem solving is exactly what you mentioned, and I think exactly what I'm hearing just in the different groups. I belong to League of Women Voters, I belong to the American Association of University Women, and I think they're two pretty pragmatic groups that are looking for representation and feedback that gives us answers to, or solutions, potential solutions to issues. And we think that is what we look for in our elected officials.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if everyone approached it that way, you would solve a lot more problems a lot more quickly. But it's how I've always been. I like solving problems. I like being in the middle of complicated issues and working through them and getting to a result where people are like, oh, that helps, as opposed to trying to work the politics of something. I've never enjoyed that.
So currently, what are the key issues or the committee meetings? You're home for a little break right now. When you go back to Washington, what would be a typical
the biggest thing that we're going to
schedule
tackle in the next couple of weeks and months is the budget, and Medicaid is part of our jurisdiction, meaning that the current budget that the majority has put forward spends about $4.5 trillion. It's almost entirely for tax cuts, and most of the expense associated with the tax cuts are for those at the top, the wealthiest people, the top 1-2%, millionaires, billionaires, these big corporations. And to pay for that, their plan is to spend several $trillion on deficit spending, meaning that they're going to just add more to the debt. And then the rest of it will be cuts. The biggest cut is nearly $1 trillion out of Medicaid. And that will come through our committee. And so that's the debate that we'll have. And I'm somebody who believes that the healthcare is critically important, that we should not take healthcare away from anyone, that we should work to expand healthcare so that everyone has healthcare, not only for their well-being, but it's just it helps in terms of a more successful economy. When you have healthier people, those are economies that do better. When you have sick people, you don't have as strong of an economy. It's also just, we care about the people that we serve and our neighbors, and we want them to be able to have health insurance so that they can go see a doctor and get help when they aren't feeling well, or they get in an accident, or whatever it is. And taking nearly $1 trillion out of healthcare will be devastating, not just for children and families, but for doctors, who will lose a bunch of people and may shutter their doors. Rural hospitals that are already struggling, children's hospitals. Half of the revenue at Children's Hospital here in Cincinnati is from Medicaid. Long-term care facilities. So it just affects everybody. It's a bad idea, and we'll make the argument: don't cut anyone's health care. And the tax cuts are fine for working people, for the middle class, for small businesses, for farmers. Protect and keep all of the tax cuts for the people who need it, and then just let the folks at the top, let those tax giveaways expire, and then you don't have to spend any money on adding to the deficit. You don't have to do any deficit spending, and no one loses their health care.
That seems so common sense.
Hopefully common sense will prevail. Yeah, like tax relief for working people, 100%. Tax relief for middle class families, tax relief for farmers, tax relief for small businesses. If 100% of the tax relief goes to those folks, then you do not have to make any cuts to healthcare, and you don't have to spend any additional deficit. You don't have to add any more to the deficit. So that's the biggest thing that we'll tackle. But we'll get into big tech. I'm a big believer that we have to protect our families from just how big these companies have become. And the fact is, you can't litigate if social media and these big companies have hurt us. And there are lots of arguments to suggest that they have, in terms of suicide rates that have gone up, mental health, all kinds of problems. There's nothing we can do as citizens to litigate that, and I think that's a huge problem. They're the only entity in the United States other than gun manufacturers that can't be sued.
When I hear something like that, I'm astonished at how is that possible?
Because the people who own those businesses, and they're not businesses, they're not companies, they're mega corporations, they're enormous profit-making entities. They make money hand over fist, billions and billions and billions of dollars in profits, and then they spend a lot of money on these politicians through their corporate PACs. And as a result, they get what they want. I don't take corporate PAC money, and I hope we get to a point where every politician refuses to take corporate PAC money. The gun manufacturer, this isn't the NRA. Like, I'm a Second Amendment guy. The NRA is great. It's the gun manufacturers who make all the money, and they're the ones paying the politicians. And on big tech, it's these big tech companies, these billionaire tech people that make all this money, and they pay the politicians. It's terrible.
Well, I have, I just spent this last weekend, and I actually saw you at an event, Celebration of Life for Francie Pepper, and it was pretty amazing to just see the array of people that her life and her husband John's, of course, was there shaking every hand. There were hundreds of people there.
Yeah.
And I know that she is watching right now.
I hope so.
And is, I really got the feeling that people that we were talking with, there was lots of conversation. I felt like there was a like-mindedness.
Yeah. She was an incredible person, a huge part of my life, and she just did so much good for so many people. Her big issue was domestic violence and protecting children and families and women, and I've taken that up. I mean, obviously, I cared about it, before I met Francie, but in a way that was not nearly as substantive as I do care about it now. And there's legislation I'm pursuing that would make it, hopefully make it much harder to get away with some of the things that happen in terms of domestic violence. I mean, there's, for example, Ohio's still the only state where strangulation, I believe, is still not a felony. And it's one of the things that you see right before somebody is killed by their partner. It's still a misdemeanor, or so anyway, there's a whole host of changes that need to be made, and on college campuses, this is a big issue for me, where you have just a ton of sexual assault and violence that happens on college campuses, and it's not something that we hold our college campuses accountable for, despite the impact it has on people's lives, for the rest of their lives. And that, a lot of that comes from Francie and the book she gave me, and that wasn't the only issue, but whatever issue it was, she just was such a force. And she did. I said, and I gave a floor speech. One of the benefits of being a member of Congress, you can go to the floor, right, which is a pretty remarkable sacred space, and recognize somebody. And of course, I did for Francie this week or last week, and mentioned that her house was a place for community. She built community. Like, she would have people there, not to throw parties as much as to get people working. Just a special person. That
was the last time I saw her, was at their home, when they, John and Francie, invited people to come and listen to League of Women Voters. Jen Miller was there speaking, and it was, you could tell that it was when she came down to join us all, you could tell that she had done that many times before.
Many, many times. Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to mention her, and I mentioned her books. I got the copies of her books, and John Pepper has done so much as well.
Both tremendous. I mean, I always tell young people, find as many good mentors or a few good mentors. I'm not sure anyone ever gave me that advice. I just got lucky. I got John, I got Francie. Ted Strickland was a mentor of mine, and of course my parents. But having people who you ask, or it's just assumed that they've sort of taken you on to help, guide you and introduce you to people and ideas. It makes a huge difference.
Well, what do you see in the future? You've mentioned a few things that are upcoming when you return to Washington. Let me ask you this: are you sensing more people that are sort of saying, "Hey, we've got to get it together. We've got to."
Yeah, I mean, it still feels very divided.
Today.
Half of us believe that this is a constitutional crisis, that this is an emergency situation where you have a president, regardless of their party, operating outside of the law. That is, in and of itself, a huge problem that should concern everybody, because it creates chaos and uncertainty and not the kind of issue or challenges that we have capacity for. Like we have so much going on in our lives to have this kind of uncertainty and chaos of a president who's operating so often outside of the Constitution. It's just hugely problematic. The indiscriminate firing of hundreds of thousands of people is not only upending people's lives, it's leading to higher rates of unemployment. The chaos around the tariffs isn't just a problem for the markets, it's a problem for people's retirements.
Right.
People have lost their jobs, companies are pulling back, consumer confidence has crashed or is plummeting, and all of that could lead to a recession. Our partnerships abroad, those alliances, those that keep us safe, have been upended. I mean, the list goes on, and what I've always wanted from my political leaders or elected officials is strong, stable, reliable leadership. That's it. And I don't think I'm unique in that. I think most people, strong, stable, reliable leadership. And whether you're to the right of me or to the left of me,
right.
As long as you're strong and you're stable and I can count on you and you're reliable and you're getting things done, great. But that's just we've lost that, and I believe that part of what people like I have to be as honest as humanly possible about this moment. This is how I'm seeing it. A very dangerous moment, and it's going to require us to take on several big fights that we have to win to fix this. One is several fights to fix the economy. All of the power and wealth is concentrated at the top, and that is causing huge disruptions in people's lives, and it's causing a tightness in people's finances. I mean, there's just people are barely getting by when all the money, I mean, it's hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars is just stuck up here at the top. And you're going to have to fix the tax code and a whole host of other things in order to get back to a place where you have real competition in our markets, and people are doing, consumers are setting the price, and there's no price gouging, and they're not working the refs and the politicians, because you got dark money or money out of politics. You got to fix politics. You got to fix government. Government is broken. Burning it to the ground, as they're trying to do, is not the answer. But you do have to fix government and make sure it's completely and utterly as efficient as it can be.
Right.
That it's easy to use, because it's not right now. Those are fights that we have to win. And then public safety. We have to keep everyone safe, and that does mean investing in police and fire and common sense gun reform and taking on these big gun manufacturers and saying like, hey, look, we're not messing with people's rights. You do have to be held accountable, though, for the gun violence. You can't keep flooding our communities with guns. And there are certain weapons that either should require additional training and registration and insurance, or you just can't, buy them because it's a military grade weapon and not something for people to hunt or keep them safe. But people should be able to have a gun or as many guns as they want at home, and they should be able to hunt. But there should be some best practices that empower law enforcement and communities to reduce gun violence. And where we've done that in states where people have maintained their Second Amendment rights and you've stood up to these huge gun manufacturers, fewer people are dead. I mean, we just have more of our friends and family that are alive that have not been victims of gun violence. That should come with adding more cops. And the same with the border. There, you need people who are going to tackle border security and immigration reform. And so, like, on one hand, I think both Democrats and Republicans haven't really tackled how to fix the economy and like the structural issues.
Right.
And so that has to be a fight that we win, and we fix this economy from the people who just have taken so much of the wealth and power. Same with our democracy and our elections. And then, but public safety is one where I feel like my side has not done a good enough job of saying we are going to keep everyone safe. We're going to secure the border. We're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform, and we're going to put more cops on the street alongside of gun reform, so that we're reducing gun violence.
Well, let me ask you about USAID.
Yeah.
Because I have been to conferences for USGLC, which is the Global Leadership Conference, U.S. Global Leadership Conference. Nonpartisan, all parties' perspectives there. And many of the key speakers there were military leaders.
Yeah.
And
from Republican administrations, Democratic administrations.
Right. And talking about USAID being the soft power that is so...
I would consider, they say soft power because they like to think of hard power as being missiles and bombs, but I think it's hard power too, because it has such a huge impact on national security and peace. And up until 80 days ago, it was a bipartisan issue where everyone agreed you got to invest some money in stabilizing unstable places and making sure that we're there, the United States, our values, democracy, freedom, we're the ones there, making sure that kids aren't getting sick and that people have enough food to eat. And if we're not there, not only do kids die and there's instability followed by war, but a country like China will come in, as they're doing now, and saying, no, we'll do it, but you're going to be part of a communist, anti-free, anti-democracy world. And that's bad for us. It's just, it leads to, it's bad for the people on the ground because they deserve democracy and freedom and food and healthcare, but it's bad for us because ultimately that place will either be very unstable and war will break out, or the Chinese will take over and our foothold in that space or in that place of the part of the world is gone, all because, I mean, what is the point? This was not something anyone they campaigned on fixing the economy. 80 days later, the economy is worse. We're heading towards a recession. But nobody said we're going to go and upend all of the work that we're doing around the world, even though it's a fraction of the budget, and it's been a bipartisan issue. It seems like vindictive and reckless.
Right. I mean, I think it's something. Unfortunately, I think it's something that we thought would never be questioned. So in a way, maybe we took it for granted. Maybe we took democracy for granted. Maybe maybe that is part of it now, that we have to wake up and say
Well, that, it's interesting you use that, because that is the language I've been using with my colleagues, friends across the aisle. And I have a lot of really good friends, who are Republicans in Congress, and we do a lot of good work together. And I'm just like, you gotta snap out of this, because we need you to. You can stand with Trump. That's your guy, but you got to pull him back a little bit. I mean, you gotta have guardrails. The president of the United States does not have the kinds of power that Trump is pretending he has, or is acting as if he has. He is accountable to the courts. He's accountable to Congress, and unless he follows those rules, which are constitutionally written rules, then Congress has to intervene, and that should be easy enough for. If this was a Democratic president and they refuse to adhere to a Supreme Court order, I would say you got to adhere to the Supreme Court order, or otherwise we're going to start pulling people in and investigating. If they try to blow up the economy by, doing tariffs global tariffs. I mean, again, targeted tariffs make all the sense in the world. I'm a big fan of using tariffs to help local, or to help American manufacturing. It almost always comes with investments in that sector of manufacturing, mm-hmm. or that sector of the economy. Mm-hmm. Doing the global reciprocal tariffs on every single country, on every good, is unprecedented, and it obviously has caused enormous chaos and uncertainty in the economy. It's also not what the president is allowed to do. That's Congress's role.
Well, and that's what a couple people asked me a few questions, one of which was that about congressional.
The tariff authority is in the United States Congress's hands, yes. Not the president's. Yes. And so there are Republicans who want that responsibility pulled back. And all we need is a handful, and for them to stand up to leadership and just say, look, we're just following the Constitution. The Constitution said that the tariff authority is here in the United States Congress, and it's been that way for hundreds of years, in part because if you had the wrong person who was doing it for the wrong reasons, they could cause a lot of damage. A lot of damage has been caused.
Right.
Yeah.
So on behalf of voters, say here in Warren County and parts of Hamilton County that you cover as well, when people say, what can we do? We can call the offices, we can write letters, we can write postcards, but really, what can we do?
Register as many people to vote as humanly possible, demonstrate, make noise, but do it in a way that is strategic, where you are trying to get people's attention who may not agree with you. And there's a way to be annoying and have people just turn it off or drive by. But I think of the 1950s and 60s and the civil rights movement, and the way in which they would demonstrate. It was this quiet power. There wasn't a lot of shouting, or if there was a big speech, it was one person who gave a pretty remarkable speech, like right. a king or something. But it was, people sort of walking quietly, sometimes singing, sometimes praying, and registering people to vote. And it was the most successful, political movement in American history.
Well, on behalf of Warren County Community Services, I had spoken with Dawn Fogarty, who had planned to be here today, but a family issue came up. Could you say, how is Warren County affected by some of the things that we've talked about? I mean, when you get phone calls from folks in Warren and Hamilton County, what are most of the calls concerning right now?
A lot of it has to do with Social Security, and they've fired a bunch of people at the Social Security Administration. They're closing offices. It's making it harder for people to talk to somebody about their Social Security checks. You're talking about most seniors. I mean, almost
Yes.
everybody, gets some of their
Right.
income from Social Security. It's almost half for the vast majority of people here, and of their income every month. That is a big one. For younger families that are looking to buy a house, the cost of housing is going up because of these tariffs. The Canadian tariffs, and the cost of lumber now being considerably more. The average cost of a new home is going to be closer to $9,000 to $10,000 more, and people don't want that. They don't want to see their prices across the board go up. Their grocery prices, which are going up, home prices, which are going up. They're frustrated about friends of theirs or themselves losing jobs. I mean, like most federal jobs are here. I mean, we have the EPA and NIOSH, which does worker safety. We have a veterans hospital. Most of the federal workers, 85% of all federal workers work outside of DC. So it's not DC. I mean, only a small percentage work in DC. Most people who work for the federal government work at our airports, and they work at our post offices, and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of people who are now unemployed, and then just the fact that there's hundreds of billions of dollars of money that's being withheld, and it's hurting our hospitals and our universities, and folks are losing their jobs because they can't, the grant isn't being paid. So I'm hearing those stories and that anxiety more than anything else, and I think there's also a frustration that, in addition to not fixing the economy and making it worse, they were supposed to fix the border and immigration, and the immigration stuff just feels, well, some of it feels quite outside the law, and the Supreme Court is saying, like, you can't do that. None of it's tackling border security. It's not solving the larger immigration issues, and there's a cruelty to it that it just isn't American. Like, it's just not who we are. So those are the
main phone calls.
Yeah, and I think people still expect me to be very much a reliable, leader who is helping get as much done and to protect us from, this behavior and these decisions as much as I can. And for example, they said they were going to fire all these people at NIOSH, which just does worker safety all over the country, and we're working with hundreds of members of Congress, over 100 members of Congress, and labor organizations, the mine workers and the steel workers and the firefighters, to convince the administration to keep those jobs.
Well, just in getting ready to meet you, today, there was a part of me that said, how can I say we're feeling good? Hope everybody's feeling good today. But I felt like we should, and I should be able to say, I hope you're feeling good, because you are here listening to.
I think it's one of those things where, just like with every other aspect of life where there are challenges, even those that seem insurmountable, you work as hard as you can. You appreciate what you can and can't do, and you do as much as you possibly can every day, and you get a good night's sleep, and then you get up and you do it again. That's the best we can do. Fight as hard as possible.
I appreciate
maintain our energy and keep at it.
Well, and you've addressed several of these, these questions that I had here on my little sheet, with the exception, well, you did mention it. How do we look at unconstitutional things that are happening? To say,
I think with anger. I mean, I think it's, people fought for this Constitution, for our democracy. They sacrificed their lives. I mean, we've gone to war for this democracy. And I think for, those folks in this administration that are acting outside of the Constitution, creating this crisis, adding more to our plates than we can really take on, it's just anger. I mean, we should be angry. And I am, on behalf of our veterans and all the law-abiding citizens. It's outrageous. Just follow the law.
And I think that we need to be more informed. I mean, I tell people you have to do the work to research. What are the real facts? And there you go.
Yeah.
With the whole communication, social media, once again, so on and so forth. You have to be able to differentiate between.
And it's hard. I mean,
It's
every
work.
one of us lives in our own little media ecosystem, and so I think you gotta sort of poke and prod and be curious. But ultimately, there are things that are just sacred that have to be untouched, and don't mess with the democracy, and or the Constitution. And they're clearly doing damage to both.
Well, I have to say, I do feel better after talking with you.
Oh, good.
Because you are very calm, cool, and collected, but I think that's the most effective way to approach.
I picked up boxing about 10 years ago, and I've had some amateur fights. But anyway, when you spar, you do your best fighting when you're calm, and that's how I've approached these fights. Is that if you're going to be compelling and win these fights, you got to stay calm.
Would you like to close down on our conversation by giving the best contact information for the office?
The best way is to just go online and Google Greg Landsman Congress, and you'll get our website with all of our emails and the phone numbers, and you can, but you can also just go on to and sign up for our newsletter, because we put out a newsletter every week, which does as much in terms of providing an update in terms of everything that happened that week. Mm-hmm. And then going on, if you're on Instagram, following us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. I mean, we're on there putting out information and content, and it's just a great way for us to stay connected.
Right. Very good. Well, on that note, I hope you're feeling good about being here
Always.
In the Channel 6 studio. I feel good that you are here, and I look forward to the next town hall, or do you have anything coming up
Yeah,
soon?
almost every other week there's a town hall of some sort.
Okay. And you are actually in the chair at the town hall. It's not one of those. The people No. What I mean is, one of my friends said, "Oh, we're having a town hall soon in
someone else's
in a
district,
in a neighboring community with a different congressman." And
I did a small one last night with a bunch of physicians. I try to do one or two a week when I'm in town. A full-blown town hall we do monthly, so you just go on sign up for our.
But this congressman refused to say that he would come to the. So it's going to be one of those empty chair town halls, where people, an audience gathers and the chair is empty. I just cannot fathom.
Me neither.
That an elected official is not coming to an audience.
My predecessor stopped doing town halls. I did 20 last year, and I don't think he had done one since the mid-90s. So I just think at some point, this is my second term, so I'm still doing town halls. If I'm here in 5 years, 10 years, and I'm not doing town halls, make sure you punch me in the face.
I will. Well, no, just like you said today, you are working for us.
You pay my bills. Yeah.
So
You pay my salary.
I think
I pay my bill.
that elected officials, have
We
to
work for you.
remember that.
That's how I was raised, both in terms of my family and my first boss, is that you are an employee of the people. You work for them.
And on that note, we hope that you will be an informed voter. Make sure that you are registered to vote. And then on election day, or even prior to election day, I think voting has started already for the May election. Please vote, because that is your opportunity to voice your opinion. And hopefully it's an informed opinion with factual information. And on that note, we'll wish you a good day. And I do hope that you will be feeling good. Bye for now.